Grief has a funny way of turning ordinary Tuesday nights into something that feels like a slow motion collapse. And the strangest part is that it often isn't the big moments that break you first. It's the silence where a voice used to be. Imagine you're sitting at a dinner table that hasn't changed in 30 years. Same chairs, same mismatched salt shakers, same clock ticking on the wall, except the person who gave that table its entire personality is no longer there. What do you reach for in that moment? You reach for the memories, and then your stomach drops when you realize how many you let slip right through your fingers. How many times did your dad start a sentence with, "Let me tell you about the time," and you looked up from your phone just long enough to nod before drifting back to whatever screen had your attention? How many times did you think, "I'll really listen next time," as though time were something that could just be rescheduled? Here's the thing nobody warns you about. A parent's stories are not just entertainment. They are the living architecture of who you came from, the geography of their failures, their laughter, their stubbornness, their survival, and once they're gone, that architecture simply stops being built. Your dad probably told the same 3 stories over and over at family gatherings, and you probably rolled your eyes at least once. What nobody tells you is that repetition was not laziness, it was an open invitation. He was giving you every chance in the world to finally ask, wait, but what happened after that? There's a quiet irony in the fact that we live in the most documented era in human history, where people film their lunch and post their morning commute, yet somehow the most important oral histories on earth, the ones sitting right across from us at Christmas dinner, go completely unrecorded. We archive the forgettable and let the irreplaceable vanish. Think about what your dad survived before you even came along. There were decades of his life that had nothing to do with being your father. Decades of being a young man who was confused, ambitious, terrified, reckless, heartbroken, and probably funnier than you ever gave him credit for. And most of that, you'll never know now because you didn't ask. Some people push back on this grief and say, well, he should have shared more on his own, and maybe that's fair. But there's a difference between a story offered and a story drawn out. And the drawing out was always our job too. It takes a curious listener to make a reluctant storyteller brave. The painful twist is that you probably did hear pieces of those stories. You heard them the way you hear background music in a store present, ambient, not quite absorbed. And now you'd give almost anything to play that music back at full volume, start to finish, with no distractions. There's a version of this that plays out in millions of homes every single day right now. Someone's father or mother is in the middle of a story, and the person listening is technically present but emotionally miles away. That person doesn't know yet what that distance is going to cost them. They will, because grief doesn't just make you miss the person, it makes you miss the version of yourself that could have shown up differently. It makes you wish you had been more curious, more patient, more willing to say, "Tell me more," instead of changing the subject to something that felt more immediately relevant to your own life. The stories your dad carried weren't just his either. Buried in his memories were things about your grandparents, your family's history, the town he grew up in, the choices that shaped the entire trajectory of your existence. Losing him meant losing a library. And libraries don't leave forwarding addresses. What's remarkable and quietly devastating is how the human brain works against you here. You remember fragments, a laugh, a gesture, a phrase he always used. But the full story, the context, the names and the dates, and here's the part nobody knows, that's what floats away first, like steam rising off something that used to be warm. There's no clean lesson here that wraps this up with a bow, but there is something you can still do, and that's talk to the people who overlap with his memory. His siblings, if any survive, old friends. Cousins who knew him before adulthood made everyone go quiet about the past. Those people are holding fragments of the library you lost, and they won't be there forever either. And if your father is still alive, stop finishing this thought in the abstract. Call him, not to check in, call him to ask something real. Dad, what's the hardest thing you ever had to do? What did you want to be when you were my age? What's something you never told anyone? You will be stunned by what comes out when someone finally asks. Because here's the thing about fathers and mothers and grandparents and every human being who has ever walked this earth carrying a story they assumed nobody wanted to hear. They are waiting. They have always been waiting. They just didn't want to be a burden, so they let the silence decide. Don't let the silence decide. The silence doesn't know what it's throwing away. You do. The grief of unlived conversations is its own particular kind of loss. Not dramatic, not sudden, but slow and accumulating, like water finding its level after a flood. It settles in the ordinary moments. When you make a decision and automatically think about what he would have said, and then remember that you don't actually know because you never asked enough to be sure. So maybe this is the real inheritance he left you. Not a warning, but an assignment to carry the curiosity forward, to ask more, to stay in the room longer, to let the people you love know that their stories matter to you before the only place those stories exist is in the ache of missing them. And just know this, the fact that you wish you had listened more, that's not guilt, that's love, showing up a little late, the way it sometimes does.